Fesgur má chula dinge agus fáilte leh go session spórs. Spórs agus programman aileach spórs. Smi sé Mairi MacRitchie for BBC Alba agus mi has a Harron. And welcome to everybody in the audience today. My name is Mairi MacRitchie from BBC Alba and I'm chairing the sport documentary conversation today. And it will be a conversation, I think, because we've had a wee preamble beforehand and we've had a very interesting chat beforehand and looking at the various things that's arising in this complex and competitive world of sport documentary. Now, ha nuki she ache gama aling a han agus kujok ha one sport, and as we see in Newquay, well, there's certainly a lot of sport, certainly surfing going on, and I think that's maybe a good place to start. Sports documentary, the environment is awash with the best high-end sporting documentaries from past surfing documentaries like Andy Irons, Kissed by God, Bethany Hamilton, Unstoppable, a new one featuring Tyree-based Ben Larg has been shown recently, Beyond the Island. There are numerous programs which have hit our screens from the world of Formula One, Drive to Survive, the American Cheerleaders, Dallas Cowboys, Full Swing from the world of golf, Tiger, Senna, the boxer and racer, the racer, Six Nations Rugby, Full Contact, Series 1 and 2, and the Beckham four-parter. So, welcome. And I hope you enjoy this next wee while with us, where we're going to take a deep dive, excuse the pun, as much as we can in the next half hour or so with our panel. So, how do smaller indies and public service broadcasters compete? Do they need to compete? We'll hopefully come to some conclusions here. So, before we go to our first panellist, let's watch what Carys Owens and the team from Whisper have been up to.
Whoever it is that said life is too short, he's right.
Every success that we make can impact everybody.
Get out! I just expect hard things to be hard.
Anger is the most difficult.
What, the bike shit? Your shit? Who's shit?
Rather than fearing failure.
Don't weigh yourselves down here now. Don't even fucking attempt it.
Embrace it.
That makes my whole freaking year.
There's always something about Sven. He'd made our fans believe.
Heskey, could it be 5?
I could do things in this sport that no one has ever done before.
World record, Superman flies again.
I was not ready for what came after that.
This is my time to shine.
The Saudi Pro League is trying to be one of the best leagues in the world.
You sat on your toilet in your hotel room and you're having a massive panic attack. I think that's probably when you know when things aren't, quite right.
14 hits with a claw hammer on the head.
Have you killed her?
No comment.
The goal of the team is to qualify for the World Cup. Stick to the game plan and we will win.
They're in your heads. They're not beating you, guys.
I'm just a boy, just every now and again, go and race around the world.
Casey.
Watching accidents happen,
Come here, for fuck's sake.
it's horrendous. You feel for the parents,
Sorry.
and there's the tiniest part of you that just thanks God that it's not your boy.
Came back not the same person. The questions kept going around. Am I still alive? Or did I die that day and I'm just not aware of it in the moment?
Race is such a complex concept, but everybody...
My legs were red because I tried to scrub my skin off.
We all are scared of the day when it's finished, when you die. But don't be sorry. Smile.
Let's go to reality.
We call him Le Patron.
Bonjour.
You're not just gonna fucking give it to us, right?
I lost both my legs in an accident.
In that right man of the people.
Rapinoe encapsulated the moment.
Carys is your champion!
I have no fucking fear. I have no fear in anything I do.
Wonderful. Now, besides Carys on the panel are Alec Harron by the Ticket Production and Irial Mac Murchú from the owner and CEO of Nemerton. Now, I'm going to start with yourself, Carys. You've got a very exciting period coming up. And I think, like we've said, small indies and public service broadcasters are finding it hard, maybe harder to compete. But what Whisper are doing in the next while is quite groundbreaking, I believe. Can you tell us a wee bit about what you're doing with the British and Irish Lions and also the processes? Because it's not just a case of going out and filming. There's an enormous amount of layers and brands and shareholders and stakeholders that are involved.
Yeah, I think with what we've just seen on screen, every single one of those documentaries are very different in how the inception of the idea and definitely the funding models are all vastly different. I think with the British Lions, I think that is actually something very new for us. So we are working with them. Is a relationship that started in 2021 on the last tour. And actually it was because of COVID, the whole camp, the bubble became locked down. So we had to deliver everything for them as a client, not just the behind the scenes, the digital content that was going out doing the tour, but also the making of the documentary. So that was all made between a team of 4 of us, which was having to capture every single moment and actually need to deliver to different stakeholders, or if the deliverables were for digital, whether it was linear, it was all had to be done by that core team. And I think that made us realise as a business, well, actually, if they as a brand and as a federation would shut everything down, what does this mean for them as far as actually monetising their content? So, I guess the next period for us is that we've created Lions Productions in partnership with them, and then we are leveraging, I guess, every single moment that's captured, whether it's going to be going out on digital platforms, and that leads the audience and the fan base to actually be really engaged throughout the competition, and then it drives them to watch the sports documentary post-tour. So once again, it's a very different model of monetising the entire, I guess, their brand. And then that also helps us with the distribution model. So we've only actually got one broadcaster attached to that right now. And that is purely because we don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, basically. So we've had that before. We've got multiple stakeholders. You need multiple sign-off. It is literally a nightmare. So I think this tour is going to be very different. What is groundbreaking is that most probably 80% of the funding of that sports doc is all going to be funded by various brands because they're paying for the crew to be there for the digital content. So it's just trying to find ways of I guess, finding the money, which I think is been a common conversation between us all, really, is like, they're very expensive to make. We get different broadcasters wanting access all areas. The Drive to Survive line always comes up. We want one of them. And you're like, well, you need multiple crews for like 6-7 months on the ground, and most of it goes in the cutting room floor. So it's just trying to get that understanding that they're not cheap to make, but it's actually up to us as producers now to find ways of funding these sports docs in a very different way.
And where do you start with that? Where do you go when you know you need X amount, and how many staff do you need to cover this?
For this current tour, it's actually quite lean. There's only going to be around 15 people working on that, which, is a big sports doc. It's quite small, actually. On the ground, it's really, really small. So we will stick to around 4 crew members, very talented people that are multi-skilled. I say they're like in the shadows. So what we like to pride ourselves on is that we're not a crew that's going to have a big boom mic in the changing rooms. We use different microphones. We plant microphones in different places, because if you want that feeling and you want these individuals, the athletes, the coaches, to be reactive and be in the moment, the last thing they need is just to sort of catch a glimpse of a lens, or, you know, there's a big boom mic coming over them. They're not actors. So, and most of the time, yes, they'll accept that they want to do it. They want to give the access, but you need to be invisible. So I think that is finding that sweet spot. And there are some really talented operators out there. So I think it's having that, it's a small team, but they're extremely talented. So it's going to be quite a lean operation this summer.
Okay, thank you. Now, there will be an opportunity at the end of the chat to ask some questions. Next, we move on to Alex Harron. And Alex, here's your highlights.
Let's go! It's Charlie Martin.
Did a fantastic job in this race, just managing it perfectly.
Because it's such a male-dominated traditional sport that people just, like I did, people just look at it and go, no one's going to accept me as a trans woman.
I'm just a person, and I just so happen to love a woman. God doesn't hate me because I'm gay. Right, I better look like a scary boxer.
Making her dreams a reality in the next year means facing ever tougher opponents, keeping her day job, and fitting in a truly life-changing event.
I just feel very, very fortunate to be my mum's daughter. I'm very proud of that fact as well. I think I was very fortunate to have a role model like that growing up. I probably didn't realise it at the time, but now when I look back, for sure. I mean, she instilled hard work into me from a very young age, and that almost like instilled the fact that it doesn't happen overnight either. Do you know, it's a long process.
Thank you. And now, Alex, as part of my research, I came across a quote you said a few years ago, better to jump in at the deep end and start filming. You can't wait until everything's perfect and good sound. Now, I'm from a radio background, so I appreciate that very much. Now, how do you see your future landscape, not only in Scotland, but beyond?
To be brutally honest, sketchy. I mean, like, everybody's cutting money. So I think as well that essentially I'm a bit of a one-man band. So the way that I always think about it is that, like, I'm competing against these big companies, and everybody is focused on sport nowadays in terms of, like, trying to get in touch with someone and trying to get them on board. It was funny with the Eilish McColgan one that it was like that story was just essentially sitting there. And I kind of thought it's probably been done, and I had a look online and nobody had done it. I was like, I went from like, okay, right, I need to get in touch with our agent really, really quickly. And I think it was quite telling that everybody's really savvy into these whole sort of like sports documentaries nowadays, that straight off the bat our agent said, well, oh, would you pitch this to Netflix? So we had to manage expectations, like, look, like BBC Scotland's the way to go with that. And once we had that conversation, it was okay. So, like, yeah, I think that's like half of the battle is just finding that person, finding that story, trying to get them on board, so that you'll actually be able to get into that situation where you could actually like pitch it. So yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to Irial now, and a documentary that's been hugely successful for yourself, involving GA heroes. So we can see some of this, a clip now.
Antrim, physically, it's the only county in Ireland without a border with the Republic. You are physically cut off and stranded.
It was really tough times through the 80s to play for Antrim, but they did it because they loved it.
Bhí sé confuirteach fásta a gnéigean a ró chaman an a lábheige a gá clíthe go hairithe in Antrim Hui.
Nobody ever spoke about Antrim, but they stayed at it, and eventually enough leaders were able to bring them to the edge of glory, and key to that was Sambo McNaughton.
Bhí Terence Samba McNaughton rinne das an léchra irden Aintrama a bhain gete san na hamáníochtas na hochtóí. Ach bhó ná sportíí na máinte Sambo, Bevelachi, chune hene chernul mar rinne.
I had a fierce bad speech impediment. Like, my primary school days were horrendous to me. I couldn't talk. I couldn't make friends. I just hit the ball against the wall. It was the only time I felt relaxed.
It is a paradox in some ways that a fella that was incapable of speaking and had so much poor treatment visited upon him ended up being the greatest evangelist of Ulster hurling.
I don't know where my life would have gone without the game.
Now, Irial, you've got over 30 years' experience and you've seen the growth of sport coverage in Ireland and Scotland. And it all started with a computer and a desk under the stairs, I believe, in your own home. And where do you see, you see there, we've seen there with Alex has mentioned earlier about the stories, it's more than just Netflix, it's more than just Amazon Prime, there's more to it for core audience to see the sport and it reflected for themselves. Isn't that the way you portray your stories?
Yeah, well, I suppose to come back to the original basis for this discussion, we don't try and compete with Netflix. I mean, we can't pay 20 million to David Beckham to take part in a documentary for TG Carr. That's not practical. I mean, TG Carr, maybe 20 million is a huge chunk of their entire programming budget for the year. So that's not practical. So, you know, don't play the rules. We're not a club team playing against an inter-county or an international team. You know, that's so you, to me, you specialise, you personalise, and going forward you have to digitise. So what does that mean? Specialising, if you're going to be doing sports documentaries, you have to eat, sleep and breathe it. You cannot, a lot of production companies and producers try and get into sports documentaries by having one good idea and they win a commission. But the depth of understanding that's needed in order to do something, any of the standard of clips we've seen there, it takes somebody who's got sport in their DNA, literally. And so you go deep. You know, Netflix produces stuff for an international audience with the budgets to attract names known to everybody on planet Earth. We don't. We personalise. So we know who our participants are, our main featured people. We know who the audience is. We produce strong human interest stories with a sporting background. That makes it a sports documentary. And in that way, everybody watching knows the person who's featuring, and the person featuring knows and trusts us enough after 30 years to know we're not going to tabloidize what they do. It's a two-way trust-based thing, and that then gives us the result of a documentary series that has stood the test of time over 30 years. The third leg of that going forward, and this is something we're all going to have to get our heads around, a lot of people still see a documentary on a linear channel as a one-off event. Okay, you might Sky Plus it and you might watch it in a week's time or something, but basically that's it gone. We're now going to have to get our heads around that a documentary is a living thing which now lives on the player, and we have to keep marketing that documentary as content that people will come back to again and again. So Terence McNaughton played for Antrim. Does Terence McNaughton make the news? Does he turn up to a charity event, a coaching event, a sporting event? That's your hook. You're in there on social media, you attach his name to it, you attach the event to it, and you attach the documentary to it. You know, do you generate other content around that? Do you personalise that to the fan that you know is watching the channels, the social media channels that you're putting your content on? So you're personalising it almost to the individual who's looking. And that's another thing we're going to have to get our heads around is data. You know, putting stuff, the earlier channel, the kids discussion was all about YouTube. You get nothing back from YouTube in terms of data about who's watching, how long they're watching for, what are they doing when they're watching, any of that. you don't even have the emails of people who will allow you to have it from your YouTube stuff. So you have to get it all onto a platform where you almost create a one-on-one conversation with the fan who is watching. And that is a whole other game. How we resource it, I don't know. That's another separate discussion. But the Terence McNaughton documentary, award-winning documentary, is there now on the player. The viewers have peaked, got a huge audience on TG Cahir for it, but it's still there. It's still as good a story today, 2 years on, as it was back then to those who haven't yet seen it. So that's the digitised part of it.
Now, digitising, this is what you've also said, Carys. How big is social media a player?
It's most probably the key at the moment, because it is just so competitive. It's a competitive market across the globe by now. And in some of those clips, obviously, that was not shown is, we've got an array of brilliant documentaries. We've worked and partnered with S4C, Espadrec. And once again, it's not just the high-end, we'll say the high-end, big-budget stuff. The premise is exactly the same. If you've got a good story, it's the same crewing, the intimate time you have with that individual or team or an athlete. Like we saw it with someone like Ivan Phillips. It was an RTS award-winning documentary. He was a brilliant prospect as a rugby player. He was in a tragic motorcycle accident and lost his leg. And it's having that connection, exactly what you've just said. It doesn't matter if it's on Netflix, you've got multi-million pounds worth to spend on it. It's the story. At the end of the day, everyone's watching sport. You could watch it live, highlights, digital, whatever you're watching that, but actually people still want to know that person. And I think utilising digital, clipping, and actually bringing the audience in is key to then winning your audience over. So, they're also timeless. I will say, yes, the sports documentaries, there's a storyline, there's a hook on there, but you really, really need to be making these films timeless. These amazing films are still on Click and iPlayer, and you can go back and watch them whenever, forever and a day. But I think it's the way that we as producers, as well as the broadcasters, we should be most probably working even harder to be promoting these films. They're films at the end of the day. It's not just sports. It's not a sporting program. These are strong storytelling films. And I think as well, I do understand the whole side of YouTube and not having enough data on the audience. But I do actually think it's going to change the landscape once again. Sports rights are declining. I think there's going to be a lot more producers. The minute you've got a good story, there's amazing content creators out there. They don't need big budgets. I think we're going to see a lot more amazing sporting films that are going to be, they'll just drop them on YouTube for free.
Can I just ask you, Carys, what do you see happening when YouTube decides to start charging for the content we produce and put out on the platform?
We could monetize it. So I think we are seeing a lot more of our brands now that, they're seeing the figures, even viewing figures on YouTube, as a driving force to monetize the kit. They're seeing big, huge improvements in how much they're charging on front of shirts. We've even, following Formula One, they're branding up baseball caps to be doing master interviews. It's just the way that I think sport is actually a really good example of how you can leverage commercial investment into a brand or your sports team or an athlete. Yeah, it's changing quickly, sometimes too quick, I think.
I'm going to go back to Alex. You're talking there about storytelling. And Alex, I know that the basis for your programmes, it's sort of very intimate because you are a one-man band that you describe. How difficult or easy is it to strike up that relationship and that trust?
I guess it's just being honest and managing the expectations. Never over-promising, essentially. Just going in and telling them, right, this is what we're hoping to do, this is what we're thinking the storyline may be like, this is what we're hoping to include, and then probably ask them, what do you not want to include? Because everybody's got red flags, essentially, things that they maybe don't want to talk about. And then what I always say is turn their nose into maybes and turn their maybes into yeses, essentially, and try and get them to talk about the things that they're slightly uncomfortable. But like a lot of my documentaries have been fly on the wall, so I've spent like a lot of time with people, so I kind of feel like it gets to the point where you're doing those kind of interviews that they'll be a bit open, they're more comfortable for you. I like some of them become really good friends with because they've just been filming that long. I mean, like the one in the boxer, because it was during COVID as well, that probably like spent about 1.5 years on that as well. So I got to the point that she was really comfortable, like saying anything, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it's just gaining their trust, essentially, so that they'll open up, so they'll say that thing that you want them to say in the way that you want them to say it. So.
Yeah. Now, people who say things the way you want them to say things, the way you want them maybe even to dance around a kitchen to Islands in the Stream, which has been seen on social and has promoted this certain programme in certain ways, is the Beckham programme. But also the documentary executive was David Beckham as well. Are we in danger of athletes controlling the narrative of the programming rather than the actual production companies that have secured them in the first place? I'll put that out to all of you.
Yes is the answer. When I was saying about the inception of each project is very different, we do actually have athletes now coming to us saying, can you make a documentary on me and we'll fully fund it? You know, these are big time athletes that have got a lot of money to spend. That's a brand piece. We will make them, but I think the audience is also very clever. I think a lot of people that actually watched the Beckham documentary, it was a nice documentary, but I think people are also very clever to watch that and go, this is a brand positioning piece. You know, especially when everyone's like, I wonder what he's going to say about the affair. You know, it was that piece where no one was like, hang on, who's actually asking the questions here? You know, so it was very skewed towards him coming out looking very good. That's fine. How was it funded? He's most probably paid for it. So, you know, I guess it's an argument of going, is there something wrong with that? Not really. I guess if there's a broadcaster behind it, yes, editorial control does need to be questioned. But I think that's the difference with, I think the audience will decide themselves whether that's a good sports documentary or a good film or not. And, you know, there's a lot of brands now that, teams, they're also wanting to fund their own drive to survive. You know, they can see the value going back to commercialising, their kits and their sponsorship, because they need a big hitter. They need a sports documentary to showcase to the audience what they're doing, but also to monetize it. It's all down to the money at the end of the day. And this is where it is also very tough, where I think actually some of our best documentaries have been with the likes of S4C because, you know, it's been funded by the broadcaster. Yes, we've got trust, but the editorial sits with us and the commissioner. So I think there must probably more of a truth behind those stories.
But at the end of the day, all three of us here are independent producers, so we get paid to produce content. So at the end of the day, whether it's a promotional video paid for by somebody who's extending their own brand, or whether it's true to our own values and the type of programming that we produce, essentially we're doing the same thing. But if it gets to a stage where the audience kind of go, well, that's only a promotional thing for this particular individual, I think there's a slight turn off there, because the producer is the storyteller. And it's all about stories and access. So you have to make a call on it, whether the access to this person is worth the input that they will give to frame their own image or not, you know. And there are times as well when you break the rules yourself. I mean, we generally don't allow our participants any say whatsoever in what goes out on screen. But I'll give you an example of a time when we were doing a documentary with Kieran Donaghy, one of the most famous Gaelic footballers in Ireland, and there was some really sensitive stuff about family breakups when he was a kid and all that. But we said, is it right to put this out without discussing it with him? So we gave him a preview and got his buy-in before we put it out. So, you know, we break our own rules at times as well.
Well, that's understandable because, you want to make the best programme possible. And that leads me finally to asking you, all three of you, is there something good, are there positives in the future of sports documentaries for indies, for public service broadcasters? The big fish aren't always going to have their way, Irial?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the future of sport in public service broadcasting, for me, or in all broadcasting, is the democratization of it. There are so many events now, of which every single one of them will be streamed, which gives all of the public more access to these people, unearths more stories which needs to be told, and in theory should be a dream for producers. However, who commissions, who funds, how do you make it, how do you get it out there? I don't know, but there are more stories evolving now about sport and sports people than ever before. It's a quandary for broadcasters as to how to capture that and how to get it produced and get it out there. But for me, the abundance of stories is a really positive thing about the future.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Eilish one, that I think it just hit that nice sweet spot, essentially, that you had Eilish that was in the sort of like public eye because they had a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games that happened in Birmingham. And then obviously our mum's story has always been there. So you're hitting kind of two different generations. But we never really pitched it as a sports documentary, even though obviously it was. That it was to do with the relationship between her and her mother and living in her mum's shadow and the kind of coming out of that. So I think like because that had like story in depth, it seemed like it was an easy win for BBC Scotland, essentially. And they wanted like a Scottish story, obviously, for St Andrew's Day. So I think it was just like perfect timing when we pitched it, essentially. So like, yeah, I mean, I guess like to a certain extent, it's try to find those stories and try to find them.
Are you feeling positive? Looking ahead?
Truthfully, not. I think I look at the way that things are and I look at the budgets, and yeah, like I think I'd be silly to say that things are looking great at the moment because they're not. But like if somebody had told me 2 weeks before I got in touch with Eilish that would lead to a commission literally 6 weeks later, I probably wouldn't be thinking that either. So like I think it's just like trying to find these stories as much as possible. And I mean the two feature docs I'm working on at the moment, one's like about an English trans woman and the other one's about an ex-boxer from like America, essentially. So like I think because Scotland's a smaller place with a smaller pool of like people that I'm having to look further afield, which is a good thing, to be honest. So
yeah. Carys?
I don't want to open the AI can of worms, but we're all going to be, I think, under threat really in the creative industries with power of AI and the capability of it in the future. And obviously, I think that sport is then going to become even more important because, the decline of people watching live TV is going to decline. And sport, once again, is most probably going to be one of the only things that the audiences are going to crave even more and going to want to watch humans reacting to something and don't 100% know what's going to happen next. So I think the power of sport and what that brings to an audience is very different to anything else in the creative industries. So I just think I think there's going to be an expansion of more and more broadcasters, platforms wanting to show sport. And I hope that is then going to lead us to want to see more behind the scenes, get to know these people, what they're like at home. These sports documentaries and these films on athletes and teams are going to become even more important. So I'm really hopeful. I think it's going to be a positive.
Good. I'm glad to hear it because we need human beings. And we need human beings at the moment. Does anybody have any questions for our panel? Gentleman over there.
Thank you. Yeah, something that Alex and Irial both picked up on, which is when you sort of embed with a person or a group of people and you're telling their story, at the beginning, you're really pushing for that access, and the more they get to know you, I think my experience has been the access opens up sometimes too much, in which they're willing to talk about anything. What's your advice for sort of someone or a team doing that for the first time, and how do you actually draw the boundaries of, wow, this is amazing for the story, but then actually, I mean, you talked about doing some previewing, Ariel, but actually some things that you're like, wow, this is great for the story, but actually this person is sharing with me because I've spent a year with them, and sort of,
So I think the secret lies in know what you want before you ever go and meet your main participant. Actually write out, this is what I want this documentary to be, this is how I'm going to structure it, and this is how I'm going to frame it. And then from there on, it's all about the relationship you build with this person. You can't just rock up, sit the person down for 3 hours and take what you get on the day. Most of the stories need to be unearthed beforehand, and you know what you're going to ask and you know how they're going to respond. And if you don't get what you want, you keep pressing until you do. And for me, that's the surest way that you can do that.
I think sometimes as well, I agree with everything you said, but occasionally like story points like pick up that you're just not aware of. Like the boxer woman Kirsten, I wasn't aware that her and her wife were trying for a baby, essentially. And so like the day of the Commonwealth title fight, they told me that she was 3 months pregnant. So a story beat that I didn't know existed that just came out of nowhere. But I guess my opinion is that there isn't them being too open. You want them to be as open as possible, because essentially you want to get all that backstory. You want them to be open in the moment, I guess, But yeah, being prepared before you turn up and being aware of what type of film you want to make, just so that you could have a dialogue, because they're probably going to ask you, like, so what's going to be in this film? And you need to have an answer, because you look unprepared and unprofessional if you don't have an answer, essentially. So,
and I always think that you as you said, you just don't know what you're going to unearth. And sometimes explaining to a contributor, this bit is going to go in, you need to put it in context. So sometimes I always say to any of our contributors, you need to just watch it and then we'll discuss it. I love what you said earlier, turn the no to a maybe and a maybe to a yes. Like, that is a huge part of the process. We worked with Sven. He actually wanted to make the film, but we didn't know he was unwell at the time. And it was a tabloid that, once we were about 6 months into the film, that a tabloid basically leaked it, which was tragic when we found out that he was terminally unwell. And basically then, for the producers of that within the team, they were all devastated, and they obviously then realised, right, now it makes sense why he feels ready to do this film, because he knows this is the end. And then the film changed. That film actually, he unfortunately passed away before that film. He never saw that film finished. So all of a sudden, he wasn't there to sign anything off. It was his family. So once again, you've got to sort of go with it. And I would always say, I just love that line. That's going to be my new line. No to maybe, maybe to yes.
Does anybody else have any further questions? The lady in front.
Thank you for a great panel. There's an annual survey of sports industry leaders looking at future trends, and this year they identified women's sport as the greatest growth opportunity of all. And I know from the work that you've produced that you recognise this, but do you think we're doing enough to showcase women's sports stories and exploit, a great growth opportunity for that audience, the female audience?
Well, BBC are huge champions of winning rights for women's sport. We've been producing the Women's Six Nations for the last 7 years, actually, and seeing the growth of women's rugby and how a broadcaster sort of constantly developed and actually invested more and more. It's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. Women's Super League football, we've been covering for the BBC as well, and I think they're actually very different as athletes. I think it's really refreshing that we'll call it TikTok gate. We had a sort of a live moment on TV the other day where an athlete actually was live on air with Gabby and basically started doing a TikTok dance live on air, like out of our control. We were like, what's going on? And the presenters joined in and another teammate, and it blew up. People were sending complaints. And it was just like, we didn't make this happen. This player's done it. This has gone viral on TikTok. I feel a bit old. I'm not really on TikTok that often, but I just thought, wow, these athletes are very different in promoting themselves, and they can see the opportunity. So I most probably think that we're going to see a big curve in the next 2 years of female athletes that are going to see the opportunity there and actually commercialise themselves. You're going to see a lot more of that.
That curve has really exponentially come up in terms of female sport in Ireland. The best example I can give is the Ladies Gaelic Football Association and its partnership with DG Cahir. When we started first televising live games in 2001, there were a few hundred people turning up at the games. That audience peaked a couple of years ago in Croke Park at almost 70,000 people at the All-Ireland final. That was greater than the amount at the European Championship finals in soccer. And that has been a real standout story of how to grow women's sport on television. And I think it's still on a bit of a journey. You know, some of the practical difficulties we have, for example, in producing documentaries around women's sports is the lack of archive, because traditionally the games weren't filmed. But with each passing year, that's now growing and growing. So is the ability to produce high quality documentaries at the same level as traditionally men's sports documentaries would have been.
Yeah, and I think with one of our shortlisted docs yesterday is at Howley Chwarae, The Right to Play. That is around the history of the women's football team in Wales. Some of the current athletes have actually told us they had no clue about what these women have gone through and fought for. So I think it also plays its part in actually helping young athletes actually understand how lucky they actually are now compared to what they were even 5 years ago. So I think there's a place for us as storytellers as well to help drive the growth of any women's sport.
Yes, and it's a similar story with Scotland, with BBC Alba as well, driving women's sport, women's football, and also the documentaries that have been made by the likes of Purple TV as well have definitely highlighted, spotlighted, and given a platform to women's sport.
I think just touching on that one of the things that I kind of when I came across Kirsten Fraser, who was a boxer, it was like obviously in sports that getting a first is almost gone now because everybody's done something. And one of the things with her was that she was the first person in Scotland to turn professional as a boxer, like 2000 and like I think it was like 19. You would think like all of that's gone now. So like to actually get that as it was happening was like a big thing, eh? So like I think that was one of the things with women's sport as well, that you were still able to get like that first that like had never happened before in Scotland. So yeah. And
similar to women's football, at certain stages it was illegal for women to box, and she started off in Muay Thai, didn't she? Any other questions from anybody? I can't see. No. Well, I think that's a really nice place to stop just now, and many thanks for being with us, and a huge thanks to the panel, Carys Owens, Alec Harron, see my teeth are in back to front now, and Irial Mac Murchú. Many thanks for your time and enjoyed the conversation. And I think there is maybe a bit of positive to be had. I'm a positive person, so I'm erring on the positive. You've learnt a new phrase, and yeah, it's been a good day. Many thanks for your time, everybody.